I never thought I'd end up stuck on a couch in someone else's apartment, watching a clock I didn't care about. My friend had promised it'd be quick. Just grab the files, we'll leave in an hour. But now he was gone, and I was here, trying not to notice the faint scent of jasmine that clung to the air. She moved around the room like she owned it, though in a way that suggested she was comfortable sharing it too. I'd met her a handful of times, always at gatherings, always with that effortless confidence that made the rest of us feel like we were fumbling just to catch up. Tonight, though, she was quieter, leaning over a stack of magazines with her sleeves rolled up, and I realized I'd never actually seen her like this. Unguarded, precise, taking her time. "You're just going to sit there?" she asked, not a tease, just a statement. I felt heat crawl up my neck. I opened my mouth to answer, but she tilted her head and held my gaze, and everything I wanted to say vanished. There was a pause, one of those silences that feels heavy without being oppressive. I could hear the subtle hum of the fridge, the soft creak of the couch under my weight, the faint scratch of her pencil against paper. I wanted to look away but couldn't. She had this way of noticing the little things about people, like she could read them without asking, and I wondered if she already knew I was nervous. Then, unexpectedly, she stepped closer, a casual gesture that somehow knocked me off balance. She crouched to tie a loose shoelace and, in doing so, brushed her fingers past mine. My heart thudded, ridiculous and impossible. I wanted to pull away, but my body refused. There was electricity in the simplicity of it, in the quiet, fleeting contact, like static before a storm. "You okay?" she asked, standing upright again, and for a moment, I swear the air between us shifted. There was warmth in her tone, but something else too, something unspoken, a curiosity that mirrored my own. I cleared my throat, trying to focus on anything else, but my eyes kept flicking back to her. She glanced down at a notebook, then back at me, and smiled just slightly, that small, knowing curve of her lips that made it feel like she had already guessed at some thought I hadn't even admitted to myself. I told myself to breathe, to act normal. My hands fidgeted with the edge of the couch cushion, but she didn't seem to mind. And in that stillness, I realized I was noticing everything. The way her hair caught the light, the soft cadence of her voice, the way she paused just long enough for it to matter. Then she moved again, and before I could register anything, she crouched in front of me and said, almost whispering, "Now it's just us." I froze, not because it was threatening or inappropriate, but because the world had tilted ever so slightly, and I didn't know if I could tilt it back. I replayed her words over and over in my head, long after she had walked away to the kitchen, long after I had tried to pretend they were nothing. I couldn't stop thinking about that pause, that glance, the way she had pinned me there, not with force, but with an unspoken weight I couldn't shake. Something had sparked, and I had no idea what it meant. I found myself back in her apartment a few nights later, this time under the pretense of helping her with a stack of files she couldn't organize alone. She had insisted I stay out of the living room, so we ended up huddled in the corner of the study, a desk lamp spilling warm light over the papers. She moved with the same ease, but there was a tightness around her shoulders I hadn't noticed before. The air smelled faintly of coffee and lavender, and I couldn't help but notice how her hands lingered over the papers, tapping or twisting a pen, as if she needed something to anchor her. I just need a minute," she said suddenly, leaning back in her chair and closing her eyes briefly. There was no dramatics, just a quiet vulnerability that made me want to reach out, even though I knew I shouldn't. I stayed silent, letting the room hum with that tentative pause. I watched her in the soft lamplight, the fine lines around her eyes more visible than at the gatherings I'd known her from, the slight fatigue in her posture, the way she pressed her lips together as if holding back some thought. Every small detail made me more aware of how careful I had to be, how much I wanted to understand her without overstepping. She opened her eyes and gave a half smile, not quite meeting mine. "Sorry, I didn't mean to. You don't have to apologize," I said softly, keeping my voice low, careful. My fingers brushed a stray paper toward her, an almost unconscious gesture. She hesitated before taking it, and our fingers touched for a fraction of a second. That fleeting contact made me realize how much tension I hadn't noticed before. The quiet pull of something forbidden, something I wasn't supposed to feel but couldn't stop noticing. Her laugh came next, low and unguarded, at something I said about the mess of her files. It was brief, but it filled the room in a way that made it impossible to ignore. I saw her shoulders loosen, just a fraction, and felt a strange ache, half admiration, half longing. She rubbed at the back of her neck, a small, human gesture, and I noticed the faint tension there, the way she seemed to carry more than she let anyone see. I wanted to ask if she was okay, wanted to offer some comfort, but I stayed quiet, letting her control the pace, letting her guide what she wanted to share. When she finally looked at me, the guarded edge in her eyes softened slightly. She tilted her head, and I caught the way the light glinted off her hair, the shadow under her cheekbone, the gentle rise and fall of her chest. I didn't move, didn't speak. I just watched, trying to memorize her in the quiet of the room. Then she leaned back in her chair and sighed, almost imperceptibly, a soft exhale that felt like permission to linger, to notice, to feel. And in that tiny, charged moment, I realized that the air between us had shifted. Something unspoken had stretched taut, and I didn't know how to let go, or if I even wanted to. The rain had started without warning, hammering against the windows as we huddled over her laptop in the dim light of the kitchen. I was supposed to be helping her with expense reports, but the storm made everything feel slower, heavier, like the world had shrunk to this small, quiet room. She leaned over the keyboard, her shoulder brushing mine, and I could feel the warmth radiating from her. I told myself it was nothing, just coincidence, but every brush made my chest tighten. There was a hesitation in the air, a rhythm we weren't acknowledging, a tension that had been building for nights like this. "You ever wonder if you're doing this wrong?" she murmured, not looking at me, her fingers dancing over the keys. I realized she wasn't just talking about the reports. There was something else, something deeper. I wanted to ask her to clarify, to dig, but I didn't. I didn't want to break whatever fragile balance existed. Her hair fell over her face, and I found myself tucking a stray strand behind her ear, almost without thinking. Her eyes flicked up, startled, just for a second, before she looked away. My fingers lingered near hers, the space between us small enough that every heartbeat felt loud. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, frowned, and set it aside without answering. The caller ID flashed a name I didn't recognize. There was a tension in her jaw, and she pressed her lips together like she was holding back words she didn't want to say. I caught the fleeting shadow of worry, or was it regret? And I didn't know if I should speak or stay silent. "Do you want some tea?" she asked finally, almost a whisper. Her hand brushed mine as she moved, and my fingers tightened reflexively on the counter edge. I knew that if I reached for her hand now, even lightly, everything would change. But I didn't. I just nodded, my throat dry, my heart hammering like it was trying to escape. We moved around each other in the small kitchen, a careful dance of near collisions and half steps. I noticed how tired she looked, the faint shadow under her eyes, the curve of her neck where the light hit. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words died before they left my mouth. I was painfully aware of the rules we hadn't spoken aloud, the lines we weren't supposed to cross. She poured the tea and handed me the cup. Our fingers brushed again. I could smell the faint lavender on her wrist, warm and subtle, and I felt the tug of something I shouldn't feel. My hand lingered near hers, trembling slightly, caught between impulse and restraint. And then, as she turned to pick up a sugar packet, I leaned just a fraction closer. Too close to be casual, but not enough to cross the invisible line. The air between us thickened, charged with what wasn't said. For one heart-stopping moment, it felt like we might fall into something we both knew we shouldn't, like the storm outside had seeped into the room and blurred the edges of control. But she moved, gently, and the moment slipped away. I exhaled slowly, my chest tight, and for the first time, I realized how impossible it was to be near her without wanting more. We sat on the couch that night, the room dim except for the streetlight slanting through the blinds. Rain still drummed against the window, softer this time, a gentle background to the chaos inside my chest. She didn't move for a long time, just stared at the floor, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the cushion. I could hear the faint hum of the heater, the subtle creak of the couch, and the uneven rhythm of my own breathing. Finally, she spoke, quietly, almost as if she were admitting something she hadn't admitted to herself. "Do you ever wonder what we're doing?" The words hung in the air, heavier than anything I could have expected. I wanted to answer, to say something clever or reassuring, but my throat felt thick, my mind cluttered with all the unsaid things I'd been holding in for weeks. She lifted her gaze slowly, meeting mine, and in that moment, the usual playfulness, the easy confidence, was gone. I saw her uncertainty laid bare, and it made my own chest tighten in a way I couldn't ignore. I don't know," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. I think about it too much." The admission felt clumsy, inadequate, but somehow it made the silence between us stretch rather than shrink. She didn't reply immediately. Her eyes flitted to the window, then to the small stack of books on the coffee table, as if she were searching for words that weren't there. I noticed how tired she looked, how the soft lines at the corners of her eyes deepened when she furrowed her brow, how she kept her hands clasped together tightly in her lap. Every tiny detail pulled me in deeper, made the restraint almost unbearable. "I feel like we're circling something we're not ready to name," she murmured finally. Her voice cracked, just slightly, and I realized how much she was holding back, not just from me, but from herself. I wanted to reach for her hand, wanted to bridge the space between us with something physical, but I froze. The moment wasn't about touch. It was about recognition, about admitting that the dynamic between us had shifted in ways neither of us could pretend away. We sat there, suspended in quiet. Every blink, every subtle movement carried meaning. I wanted to speak again, to say something that would anchor the moment, but the words refused to come. She shifted slightly, leaning back, and I caught the briefest sigh escape her lips, a sound that was neither relief nor sadness, but something in between. I felt a lump rise in my throat, a mirror of the confusion twisting through her. I don't know what to do with this," she said at last, the words almost breaking. Her eyes glistened, and for the first time, I saw her vulnerability so raw that it made my own heart ache in response. And then she looked away, whispering almost to herself, Maybe I've already ruined it." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stayed there, letting the weight of those words settle between us, knowing that nothing could go back to the way it had been. I was helping her sort through a pile of old papers she'd pulled from a drawer, the storm from last night having passed, but leaving the air thick and still. Most of it was mundane: bills, receipts, takeout menus. But tucked beneath the stack, I noticed a folded envelope, yellowed at the edges, handwritten in a delicate script. She saw me pick it up and froze, her fingers hovering over the pile like she might snatch it back. "Don't," she started, then paused, as if she hadn't decided whether she trusted me yet. "I won't," I said softly. Her eyes flicked to mine, and I saw something in the way she blinked: hesitation, fear, maybe relief. She let me keep it, and we sat there, side by side, the envelope small between us, and for a moment, the apartment felt impossibly quiet. I didn't think anyone would ever read this," she said finally, her voice low. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and avoided my gaze. "It's from someone I lost a long time ago." I nodded, not wanting to interrupt. There was no judgment here, no curiosity beyond what I could gently hold in my chest. She sighed, almost as if she were exhaling years of weight, and began to tell me the story in fragments. "It wasn't just a relationship," she said, her fingers tracing the edge of the envelope. "It was someone who understood me when no one else did. And I let them go. I made mistakes, things I still think about." She swallowed, and I noticed how her hands shook slightly. I reached out, almost instinctively, and brushed a finger against hers. She didn't pull away, not immediately. I know you think I'm all confidence and control," she whispered. "But there's this. This hole I've carried for years. And sometimes, it feels like it's too heavy to let anyone in. I didn't say anything. Instead, I remembered a story she'd told me months ago about a friend she'd lost contact with, someone she had confided in. I realized now the pieces lined up, the letters, the voicemails she'd never deleted, the way her smile sometimes faltered when she thought no one was looking. The weight of it shook me more than I expected, not because I felt pity, but because I understood, in a way I hadn't before, how much of her heart was careful, measured, and, until now, unreadable. She finally looked at me, eyes glossy but steady. "I don't know why I'm showing you this," she admitted, almost laughing to herself. "Maybe because I don't know who else I could." I stayed silent, letting her words hang in the air. My chest ached, not with desire, but with recognition, with the fragile intimacy of being trusted with someone's hidden past. And then, without another word, she handed me the envelope. Our fingers brushed again, this time longer, almost lingering, and I felt the tiniest tremor run through the space between us, a quiet quake that neither of us could name. For a moment, the room wasn't just her apartment or a stack of old letters. It was everything she had carried, and I was holding a piece of it, too. We didn't speak for a while after the envelope, just let the quiet settle between us. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the windows misted with a soft haze that blurred the streetlights outside. It felt like the world had shrunk to this apartment, to this corner of the couch, to the weight of our shared silence. I noticed her more fully in that quiet, how she tucked one knee under her, how her fingers flexed idly on the cushion, how the faint crease between her brows softened when she let herself exhale. She was still guarded, still careful, but there was a subtle surrender in the way she let the room, and me, fill her space. "I didn't show this to anyone," she murmured, almost to herself, and I realized I wasn't the one speaking, but the one listening, absorbing. The words weren't dramatic, weren't meant to elicit an answer. They were a letting go, a quiet offering. I shifted slightly closer, not intending to close a distance, but my knee brushed hers. She didn't flinch. My hand hovered near hers, and slowly, naturally, our fingers intertwined. Not a gesture of romance yet, but of presence, of acknowledgement, of two people inhabiting the same fragile moment without pretense. We didn't need to talk. Our silence was its own language. The soft hum of the fridge, the distant street noises, the occasional drip from the windows. All of it felt like punctuation for the understanding we'd arrived at together. I could feel her pulse against my palm, steady, human, and it anchored me in a way words never could. Her head tilted slightly toward me, almost imperceptibly, and I leaned just enough to catch the warmth of her temple near my shoulder. It was intimate without needing explanation. I could feel the trust, the relief, the tiny victories of vulnerability she had allowed me to witness. "I think I'm okay with this," she said quietly, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear, her voice carrying a soft certainty that was more powerful than any declaration could be. "Being here, like this." I didn't respond with words. I didn't need to. I rested my forehead gently against hers, just for a second, enough to share understanding, enough to seal the space between us. Her fingers squeezed mine, almost as if to remind me she was choosing this moment, too. The night stretched around us like a soft blanket, and for the first time, I realized that the connection we'd been circling for weeks, years, in some ways, was no longer tentative. It had settled, quietly, irrevocably, into something inevitable, not fairy tale perfect, not sudden, but real, earned, fragile, human. We sat that way for a long time, not moving, not speaking, letting the world continue outside while our own small universe held still. My heart had never felt lighter, nor more tethered. And when she finally exhaled, letting a tiny smile slip into the corner of her lips, I knew we didn't need words, promises, or labels. This quiet togetherness, this gentle trust, was enough. Looking back now, I realize how quiet the beginning of it all was, how nothing screamed, "This will change everything." We started in small, ordinary ways, a shared glance, a brush of fingers, a half smile in a storm. And yet, when I think about it, those moments carried the weight of everything we hadn't said. I've learned that love doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it sneaks in during ordinary evenings, in the comfort of someone's presence, in the way their laugh lingers in your chest, or the way their silence feels like a conversation only you can understand. She taught me that, not with words, but by letting me see her layers, her humor, her grief, her strength, and the quiet vulnerability she rarely showed the world. She's changed too, I think. Not because I made her, or because the moments we shared were dramatic, but because the act of being trusted to witness her past, to sit with her uncertainty, gave her permission to be more herself. Less guarded, more present. And I saw it. Every time we leaned into our quiet spaces together, every time our hands brushed and neither of us pulled away. I've carried that with me ever since. A lesson in patience, in noticing the small tremors of connection, in understanding that the most meaningful things aren't always shouted. They're lived, they're breathed, they're experienced, moment by moment, in the rhythm of someone else's heartbeat next to your own. Sometimes I still think about that first night, the envelope, the storm, the brush of her hand, and I smile, because it wasn't about a confession or a declaration. It was about arriving at understanding, at trust, at something neither of us had words for yet. That's what made it real. That's what made it lasting. We never needed to define it or label it. It exists in the spaces between us, in shared silences, in small gestures, in the quiet acknowledgement that someone is there for you in ways you never expected. That's what love feels like when it's earned, not forced. And when I look at her now, sitting across from me, still effortlessly layered and still holding pieces of the past close to her chest, I know that nothing about this story was simple, but it was ours. Every heartbeat, every hesitation, every trembling glance led to this. A connection we both chose, quietly, persistently, and completely. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?